He called me a charity case. Right there at the head table, in front of 400 guests, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandeliers above the Royal Mayfair banquet hall, my son's business partner leaned into the microphone and said those words about me. I watched my son's face go still, and I reached into my purse, felt the folded envelope I had carried for 11 years, and I thought, not yet, but soon. My name is Dorothy, and I am 63 years old. I live in Edmonton, Alberta, in the same house I bought with my own hands in 1998, when the mortgage rate was 6.5%, and I was working double shifts at the Foothills Medical Center as a registered nurse. I raised my son alone from the time he was 4. Not because his father died, though there are days I wish the story were that clean. His father left because he found someone younger, someone without a toddler tugging at her sleeve, someone who didn't smell like hospital antiseptic when she came home at midnight. He signed away his parental rights 18 months after he left. I did not fight him on that. Some gift. I want you to understand what those years looked like, because the ending of this story only means something if you know the beginning. I worked the overnight ward at Foothills 4 nights a week and picked up weekend shifts at a walk-in clinic in Sherwood Park. My mother watched my son on the nights I worked. God rest her. She never once complained, though I know it cost her sleep she never got back. I made $51,000 a year before tax. After rent, after groceries, after the daycare copayment, after the hydro bill that nearly broke me every February, I put $40 a month into a savings account I called my son's university fund. $40. Some months it was $20. Once, during the ice storm of 2003 when my car needed a new alternator, it was nothing at all. My son's name is Marcus. Even as a small boy, he had his grandfather's serious eyes, the kind that made you feel, when he looked at you, that he was already calculating 3 steps ahead of the conversation. He was 8 when he started keeping a little notebook where he wrote down every purchase I made at the superstore and then compared it to the flyer prices from the week before. He was 12 when he told me we were losing $4.60 per week by buying the wrong brand of oatmeal. I laughed until I cried, and then I hugged him so hard he squirmed. He was going to be all right. I knew it even then. He was 17 when he told me he wanted to study business at the University of Alberta. I told him that was wonderful. I did not tell him that the savings account had $11,000 in it, nowhere near enough, and that I had already started looking at part-time evening nursing positions to close the gap. I applied for every bursary I could find. I wrote the letters myself, late at night at the kitchen table after Marcus was asleep, explaining our income, our circumstances, of our hopes. We received the Alberta Heritage Scholarship, 2 smaller bursaries from the Nursing Association, and a federal student loan that Marcus signed for himself and swore to me he would repay. He graduated with honors. He went on to do his MBA. By the time he was 32, he had co-founded a logistics consulting firm with a man named Gerald Whitmore, a man 12 years, his senior who had the investor contacts and the office space and the reputation, while Marcus had the mind and the work ethic and the ideas that actually made money. The firm was called Whitmore Callahan Consulting, and within 4 years, it had 17 employees and a contract with a provincial crown corporation that made the Edmonton Journal business section. I cut out the article. I still have it in my kitchen drawer, next to my mother's rosary. I should tell you about the first time I met Gerald Whitmore. It was at a dinner Marcus hosted at his apartment, a modest place in the Oliver neighborhood, because my son has never been a man who spends money to impress people. Gerald arrived 40 minutes late with a bottle of Bordeaux that he placed on the table with the label facing outward, very deliberately. He shook my hand and said, "So you're the nurse, not Dorothy, not Marcus's mother." "The nurse." I smiled and said yes, and I passed him the bread basket. Over the following years, I noticed things. The way Gerald always spoke about the firm as though it were primarily his creation. The way he referred to their clients as my clients. The way he once said, at a Christmas dinner Marcus hosted, that Marcus had been lucky to have the right mentor at the right time. I watched my son's jaw tighten and then release, the way it always did when he chose not to say the thing he was thinking. I said nothing. It was not my business. Marcus was a grown man and a capable one, and I trusted him to know what he was doing. What I did not know, what Marcus did not tell me for a long time, was that Gerald had been slowly restructuring their partnership agreement over the previous 2 years. Small amendments, presented as routine administrative updates, that gradually shifted the equity split and the decision-making authority. Marcus discovered it when he went to refinance his share of the firm, and the numbers no longer matched what he believed he owned. He hired an accountant, then he hired a lawyer, and then, because he is his grandfather's grandson, he said nothing and started keeping records of everything. He did not tell me any of this. He told me later that he was protecting me, that he didn't want me to worry, that he was handling it, that he needed to build his case carefully before he moved. I understand that. I do. But I want to be honest with you. When I finally found out, sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of tea gone cold, I felt a grief that surprised me. Not because he had kept a secret, but because somewhere along the way, my son had learned to carry things alone. I wondered where he had learned that. Then I looked around my kitchen and I knew exactly where he had learned it. I need to go back 11 years, to the thing in the envelope. In 2015, I was working as a charge nurse on a medical unit at a hospital in Edmonton. We had been short-staffed for 8 months. The kind of short-staffed that means you are managing 14 patients instead of 8. That means you haven't taken a real lunch break since April. That means you are making small errors of exhaustion, that you catch yourself just in time, and you lie awake at night terrified of the day you don't catch one in time. I filed incident reports. I wrote formal complaints to unit management. I requested a meeting with the director of patient care. I was told each time that the staffing situation was being reviewed, that resources were allocated according to current guidelines, that my concerns were noted. In October of that year, a patient in my care, a 71-year-old retired teacher named Leonard from Leduc, fell while attempting to get to the bathroom unassisted because his call bell had not been answered for 40 minutes. He had a subdural hematoma. He spent 6 weeks in ICU. He survived, but he never walked without a cane again. The incident review concluded that the fall was attributable to patient non-compliance with bed rest instructions. I knew that was not true. I had the call bell logs. I had my own records of the staffing ratios that night. I had a written exchange with the unit supervisor from 2 weeks earlier in which I had explicitly flagged that our ratios were unsafe. When the final report was issued, a report that absolved the administration completely, I requested a copy and I read every page. And there, in the documentation, I found the name of the administrator who had approved the staffing levels that night, who had reviewed my earlier complaints and signed off on the finding that our unit was operating within acceptable parameters. The administrator's name was Gerald Whitmore. He had been a regional health authority director before he left to start his consulting career. The same Gerald Whitmore who would, 7 years later, shake my son's hand and say, "You're lucky to have me." I kept the documents. I don't know exactly why, some instinct I couldn't name. I put them in an envelope, and I put the envelope in the fireproof lockbox under my bed where I keep my will and Marcus's birth certificate. I filed a complaint with the College of Registered Nurses, which was reviewed and noted and, as far as I could tell, resulted in nothing visible. Leonard and his family were never told the full picture. That has stayed with me. I did not know, when Marcus came home for Christmas in 2018 and told me he had gone into business with a man named Gerald Whitmore, that it was the same person. Whitmore is not an uncommon name. Gerald is not an uncommon name. I had no reason to make the connection. The connection made itself 2 years later when Marcus showed me a photo of the two of them at a client event, a photo that ran in a trade magazine. I was at my kitchen table. I was looking at the magazine, and I felt the floor of my chest drop away. I said nothing to Marcus. I went to the lockbox. I reread every page of the documents I had kept for 5 years. And then I did something I had never done in my life. I hired a private investigator to find out what Gerald Whitmore had been doing between his time at the Health Authority and the founding of Whitmore Callahan. What she found took 4 months to compile. It was thorough and it was documented, and it was, in the legal opinion of the lawyer I consulted the following spring, potentially actionable on several fronts, including one that involved a very large severance payment that had been processed through the health authority's accounts in a way that did not align with the termination agreement file. I updated the envelope. I said nothing. I want to be clear that I did not plan to use any of this at my son's business anniversary gala. I went to that evening expecting to sit at a table with Marcus's colleagues, eat the salmon, and take the bus home by 9:30. Marcus had sent a car for me, which I told him was completely unnecessary, and then accepted because my hip had been bothering me and I didn't want to argue about it. I wore the navy dress I bought for my niece's wedding 2 years ago. I did the clip earrings that had been my mother's. I brought the envelope because I bring it almost everywhere now, a habit I developed without quite deciding to. The Royal Mayfair is a beautiful room. I'll give Gerald Whitmore that. When he chose a venue, he chose a beautiful one. There were 400 people there. Clients, investors, city councilors, 2 provincial ministers. Marcus had told me the firm had just closed its largest contract to date. He was glowing in a way I had not seen since his convocation, and I held his arm for a moment before we went inside, and I thought, we made it. He made it. I was seated at table 6. Not the head table. When I arrived and found my name card, I looked up and saw that the head table held Gerald, his wife, several major clients, and Marcus with an empty chair beside him that I realized, from the name card, was meant for Gerald's adult daughter. I was at table 6 with some junior associates and a woman from the Crown Corporation who was very kind and told me she had heard wonderful things about my son. I noticed, but I did not make it an event. I sat down. I ordered the salmon. The speeches began after the main course. Gerald spoke first, which I suppose made sense since his name came first in the firm's name. He spoke for 18 minutes, I counted. He talked about his vision, his leadership, his decision to bring in a young partner with potential. He said Marcus had been a strong executor of his strategies. He said, and I want to be precise here because I have thought about this sentence many times since. He said that the firm's success was proof that good mentorship creates opportunities for people who wouldn't otherwise have access to this level of business. People who wouldn't otherwise have access. The woman from the Crown Corporation glanced at me. I looked at my water glass. Then Gerald introduced his daughter, who was going to say a few words. And his daughter, a pleasant woman in her late 30s, who had no reason to be cruel and I think perhaps did not understand what she was doing, said that she wanted to toast to her father's generosity, and she mentioned, specifically, that Gerald had always had a soft spot for taking in people who needed a leg up. And she looked toward table 6, and she said that she understood Marcus's mother was here tonight, the nurse, and that it was lovely that she could be here to see what Gerald had helped her son become. She raised her glass to me, across the room, like I was a sponsored child in a holiday advertisement. The room applauded. Several people looked at me with warm, pitying smiles. My son's face had gone the color of the white tablecloth. I felt something settle in me then, very quiet, very cold, very clear. It was not rage. I want to make sure I describe this accurately. It was something more like the feeling you get when, after a very long wait, a door finally opens. I stood up. I am 63 years old and I have been standing up in difficult rooms my entire adult life beside patients' beds at 2 a.m, in front of nursing supervisors who didn't want to hear what I had to say, at a kitchen table with a 4-year-old asking me where Daddy went. I know how to stand up in a room. I said, "Thank you so much. I'm Dorothy, Marcus's mother. And I do have a few things I'd like to say tonight, if no one minds." I said it pleasantly. I smiled. Several people smiled back. Gerald's expression shifted, just slightly. I thanked the Royal Mayfair staff. I thanked the clients who had trusted the firm. I said that Marcus had been building things since he was 8 years old, with a notebook and a grocery flyer, and that he had never once needed someone to hand him access to anything. Then I said that I had spent 34 years as a registered nurse, and that I had learned many things in that career, but the most important was the importance of accurate records. I said that I happened to have done some research into Mr. Whitmore's previous career in Health Services Administration, and that I had documentation I believed would be of considerable interest to several people in the room, including, perhaps, the 2 provincial representatives I could see at table 3. I said that I had already shared these documents with a journalist at the Edmonton Journal who covered health policy, and with a lawyer who specialized in public sector accountability, and that the story would be running in 3 days, whether or not tonight went any particular way. I looked at Gerald. I said, "I want to be clear that Marcus had no knowledge of any of this. He built this firm. He built it with his mind and his character and his work. Whatever happens next with your partnership is between the two of you and your lawyers. But I think the people in this room tonight deserve to know who they're in business with. I sat down. The room was very quiet. I took a sip of my water. Gerald stood up. He said something, I don't remember exactly what. Something about misunderstandings, about context, about conversations that should happen in private. His voice had lost its banquet hall steadiness. He sat back down. His daughter was staring at him. His wife was looking at the tablecloth. One of the provincial representatives got up and left the room quietly, phone already in hand. Marcus came to my table. He crouched down beside my chair and he didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, very quietly, "Mum, how long have you had those documents?" I told him. All of it, Leonard. The incident report, the complaint that went nowhere, the connection I made when I saw the magazine photo, the investigator, the lawyer, the journalist, everything. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You should have told me." I said, "You should have told me about the partnership agreement." We looked at each other. He had his grandfather's eyes, as I said that calculating, 3 steps ahead look. But right then he looked exactly the way he had when he was 4 years old, and his father's car had pulled out of the driveway for the last time, and he had turned to me and said, "Is he coming back?" And I had knelt down on the cold porch and told him the truth. He put his head on my shoulder, right there at table 6 of the Royal Mayfair, in front of whoever was still watching. I put my hand on the back of his head the way I used to when he was small. The journalist's story ran 4 days later, not 3. She needed the extra day to get Gerald's non-response on record. The health authority confirmed they were reviewing the documentation. Gerald's 2 largest clients suspended their contracts pending the outcome. Whitmore Callahan dissolved its partnership by the end of the following month. Marcus retained the client relationships he had built, retained 2 of the firm's 4 staff members, and registered a new company, Callahan Advisory, within 6 weeks. It is doing well. He called me the day he signed the registration papers. He calls me most Sundays now. We have dinner at my house the first Sunday of every month. He still checks the grocery flyers. The woman from the Crown Corporation, the one who sat with me at table 6 that night, sent me a card 2 weeks after the gala. She said she had worked with Gerald Whitmore during his health authority years and had always felt something was not right, but had never had the language or the evidence to say so. She said thank you. She said Leonard's name. Somehow, I don't know how she knew it, perhaps from the journalist's piece, and she said she was sorry it had taken so long. I keep her card in the lockbox now, next to the envelope that is finally, after 11 years, empty. I raised my son alone. I want to say that again, not as a complaint, but as a simple fact, the way you might state the weather or the distance between 2 cities. I raised him alone, on double shifts and $40 savings deposits and letters written at a kitchen table after midnight. Nobody gave us access. Nobody needs to be thanked for what my son built. And nobody, not at a banquet table, not into a microphone, not with a champagne glass raised in my direction, gets to tell the room otherwise. Not while I'm sitting at table 6 with an envelope in my purse. Not while I can still stand up.